Prayers.
Almighty God, who in infinite wisdom and providential goodness have appointed the office of leaders and permits for the certain and just government of humanity, we beseech to look upon with your abundance for these your servants, whom you have been pleased to cause performance of such importance in this land. Let your blessing descend upon them here assembled, and grant that they may, in your presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under their deliberation in so just and faithful manner as promote your honor and glory, and to advance the good of those whose interest you have committed to their charge. Amen.
Item number 2 on the order paper, communication from the chair.
Honorable members, I welcome you to the sitting. The order paper is a fairly long one, but we need to finish what is on the order paper today, so there will be no communication from the chair. Let's proceed.
Item number 3 on the order paper, motion for presentation, consideration, and adoption of the report of the Public Accounts Committee on the report of the Auditor General on the health sector for financial year 2014-15.
Honorable Chair, Public Accounts. Next.
Item number 4 on the order paper, motion for presentation, consideration, and adoption of the report of the Secretarial Committee on Defense and Internal Affairs on the proposed ratification of the East African Community Protocol on Cooperation in Defense Affairs.
Honorable Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. Honorable members, I'm here to present 2 brief reports from the Secretarial Committee on Defense and Internal Affairs on the proposed ratification of the East African Community Protocol on Cooperation in Defense Affairs. Right Honorable Speaker and honorable members, on 10th May 2016, the Honorable Minister of Defense moved a motion in Parliament under Rule 30 and 31 of the Rules of Procedure of the Parliament of Uganda, Article 123(1) of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, 1995, and Section 2 of the Ratification of Treaties Act, Cap 204 of the Laws of Uganda, seeking a resolution of Parliament ratifying the East African Protocol on Cooperation in Defense Affairs, herein after referred to as the Protocol. Noting that the 10th day of May 2016 was the last sitting day of the 9th Parliament, the Protocol was referred to the Committee on Defense and Internal Affairs of the 10th Parliament for consideration. Methodology. In the process of scrutinizing the protocol, the committee noted that the process is of little consequence since it was already signed by His Excellency, the President, in the exercise of his constitutionally given mandate. This notwithstanding, the committee met and interacted with the Minister of Defense and Veteran Affairs as the lead minister in the implementation of the agreement, together with the technical persons in the Ministry of Defense and Veteran Affairs. Scrutinizing the protocol, the committee studied the following documents: the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, the UN Charter 1945, the Constitutive Act of the African Union, the Treaty for the Establishment of the East African Community, the Protocol relating to the establishment of the Peace and Security Council of the African Union. We looked at also the ratification of Treaties Act, Cap 204 of the Laws of Uganda, and the Uganda People's Defense Forces Act 2005. The objectives of the protocol are develop, promote, and pursue policies and programs aimed at widening and deepening cooperation among partner states in defense affairs for their mutual benefit. Promote peace, security, and stability within and good neighborliness among partner states in order to guarantee the protection and preservation of life and property, the well-being of the people of the community and their environment, as well as the creation of conditions conducive to sustainable development. C, anticipate and prevent conflicts and, in circumstances where conflicts have occurred, to undertake peace support operations and peace-building functions for the resolution of conflicts. To promote and implement peace-building and post-conflict reconstruction activities to consolidate peace and prevent resurgence of violence. E, coordinate and harmonize regional efforts in the prevention and combating of international terrorism in all aspects. And F, undertake such activities ancillary to cooperation in defense affairs that are calculated to further the objectives of the community as the partner states may from time to time determine. The legal mandate for the execution of the protocol, the treaty for the establishment of the East African Community in Article 151 makes provision for partner states concluding protocols as may be necessary in each area of cooperation, which shall spell out the objectives and scope of and institutional mechanism for cooperation and integration. Indeed, by virtue of Article 151, Sub-Article 4, the annexes and the protocols to the treaty form an integral part of the treaty. The parent law for the execution and ratification of treaties in Uganda is Article 123 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. It provides execution of treaties, conventions, and agreements. The President or a person authorized by the President may make treaties, conventions, agreements, all other arrangements between Uganda and any other country, all between Uganda and any international organization or body in respect of any matter. Parliament shall make laws to govern ratification of treaties, conventions, agreements, or other arrangements made under Clause 1 of this article. The law enacted by Parliament in this regard is the Ratification of Treaties Act, Cap 204 of the Laws of Uganda. Section 2 thereof provides that ratification, all treaties shall be ratified as follows: by Cabinet in the case of any treaty other than a treaty referred to in paragraph B of this section, all by Parliament by resolution, where the treaty relates to armistice, neutrality, or peace, all in the case of a treaty in respect which the Attorney General has certified in writing that its implementation in Uganda would require constitutional amendment. Parliament is therefore sought out to ratify the protocol in issue under the provisions of Article 1513 of the Treaty for the Establishment of the East African Community and Section 2B1 of the Ratification of Treaties Act. However, like earlier observed, the process is not participatory enough, as Parliament is only required to ratify instruments that have already been executed by the head of state or his lawful delegatee. It is crucial that in ratification of all treaties, the public and parliamentary participation are guaranteed in line with Article 38(1) of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. Article 26 of the protocol also requires ratification and deposit of the instruments of ratification with the Secretary General by all parties for the protocol to become in force. Ratification, honorable members and Right Honorable Speaker, is the confirmation or adoption of an act that has already been performed. A principal can, for example, ratify something that has been done on his or her behalf by another individual who assumed the authority to act in the capacity of an agent When it comes to treaties, it means that when a state signs the treaty, the signature is subject to ratification, acceptance, or approval. The state has not expressed its consent to be bound by the treaty until it ratifies, accepts, or approves it. As a nation, while the president can represent us under the constitutional authority of Article 123 in signing treaties, the people of Uganda, through their elected representatives, have to ratify, accept, and indeed approve that they be bound by the treaty so executed or signed by the president in line with Article 1.3 of the Constitution. This is what we are being called upon to do as the House of Representatives of the people of Uganda. Observations and recommendations. The committee observed that the government of Uganda, in signing the protocol, is complying with National Objective and Directive Principle of State Policy 28.2, which requires Uganda to actively participate in international and regional organizations that stand for peace and for the well-being and progress of humanity. 2, Article 2 and 16 of the protocol provides for scenarios where the officers and men of our forces may traverse other jurisdictions, and as such highlights the importance that lies in the Parliament of Uganda ratifying this protocol, especially in light of Article 210D of the Constitution of Uganda and Section 39, 40, and 41 of the Uganda People Defence Forces Act 2005. The protocol highlights the commitment of Uganda to establishment of a framework for close cooperation in defense affairs, for promotion of peace, security, and stability within and good neighborliness as an East African Community partner state. The signing of the protocol by His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, is consistent with the provisions of the Charter of the UN, the Constitutive Act of the African Union, the protocol relating to the establishment of Peace and Security Council of the African Union, and a treaty for the establishment of the East African Community. The country has often defaulted on their financial obligations to regional and international bodies and associations. Recommendations. The committee therefore recommends that right from inception, the implementing ministry or department should work with the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development to ensure sufficient allocations and releases from the national budget to meet the country's financial requirements as envisaged in Article 19 of the protocol. The committee further recommends that since Article 26 of the protocol also requires ratification and deposit of instruments of ratification with the Secretary General by all parties for the protocol to come in force, it is imperative that Uganda, as a state party of the East African Community, fulfills her requirement to ratify in order not to frustrate the integration and resultant cooperation under the protocol. The committee recommends that this sitting of the 10th Parliament adopts this report and collectively resolves to ratify the East African Community Protocol on Cooperation in Defense Affairs, signed by the President of Uganda under his constitutional authority on 28th April 2012. Right Honorable Speaker and Honorable Members, I beg to move.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Members, that is the report on this treaty that had been brought before this House for ratification. You all know that, as the Chair has stated, Uganda adopted this dualist system of a two-way mechanism for ratification of treaties, one by Cabinet and one by Parliament, and she has spelled out circumstances under which Parliament does the ratification. Now, the question that the House has to examine to satisfy itself that is a treaty that they can ratify is to assess its impact on the Constitution, negative or positive, and whether we are ready to go that way. And if we are ready to go that way, we adopt the treaty and ratify it accordingly. But to say also that the people who sat there, the president, took the initial decision that was a proper step to take to facilitate the integration process for the community. So that is what we have, and the motion that I now propose for your debate is for the adoption of the report of the Sectoral Committee on Defense and Internal Affairs on the proposed ratification of the East African Community Protocol on Cooperation in Defense Affairs. Yes, motion.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker. Being aware that it's an obligation, constitutional obligation, for this House to ratify, and being aware that the President of the Republic of Uganda has already signed, and in the circumstances that the motion and the committee report indicates that the treaty is consistent with not only with our legislations here, but with other legislation within the African Union and East African Community. I do hereby move that the report of the committee be adopted without further debate.
That the question be put.
And I therefore move that the question be put for the adoption of the report.
Thank you, honorable members. The motion on the floor is that the question be put, and once that motion is raised, unless the speaker has reservation, he will proceed to propose the question to that, put the question to that motion. So we'll deal with the motion that the question be put first. Honorable members, I put the question to the motion that the question be put. Will those in favor say aye? To the contrary, no. Aye. The ayes have it. I now put the question to the motion for adoption of the report of the Sectoral Committee on Defense and Internal Affairs on the proposed ratification of the East African Community Protocol on Cooperation in Defense Affairs. Will those in favor say aye? To the contrary, no. Aye. The ayes have it. Honorable members, there should be a ratification motion now. I now put the question that treaty for ratification of East African Community Protocol on Cooperation and Defense Affairs be ratified. Will those in favor say aye? To the contrary, no. Aye. The ayes have it. Thank you. Next item.
Item number 5 on the order paper. Motion for presentation, consideration, and adoption of the report of the Sectoral Committee on Defense and Internal Affairs on the proposed ratification of the agreement for the establishment of the East African Standby Force.
Chair.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker and honourable members. I'm going to present another brief report on the proposed ratification on the agreement for the establishment of the East African Standby Force. Right Honourable Speaker and honourable members, on the 10th of May 2016, the Honourable Minister of Defence moved a motion in Parliament under Rule 47 of the Rules of Procedure of the Parliament of Uganda, Article 123, Sub-Article 1 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, and Section 2B1 of the Ratification of Treaties Act, Cap 204 of the Laws of Uganda, seeking a resolution of Parliament ratifying the agreement for the establishment of the East African Standby Force. Noting that the 10th day of May 2016 was the last sitting day of the 9th Parliament, the agreement was referred to the Committee on Defense and Internal Affairs of the 10th Parliament for consideration. The East African Standby Force is a regional organization whose mandate is to enhance peace and security in the Eastern Africa region. It is one of the 5 regional multidimensional forces of the African Standby Force, consisting of military, police, and civilian components. East African Standby Force was established as a regional mechanism to provide capability for rapid deployment of forces to carry out preventive deployment, rapid intervention, peace support, stability operations, and peace enforcement. The East African Standby Force was established with a vision to contribute to regional and continental peace, security, and stability, and enhance regional integration, while its mission is to maintain and sustain a fully operational and multidimensional integrated standby force ready to respond to emerging crises. Right Honorable Speaker and honorable members, the need for a common African defense and security mechanism was a key feature in the inaugural summit of the African Union held in Durban, South Africa in July 2002. The African leaders felt compelled to develop African solutions that would respond to the multifaceted challenges threatening stability, security, and cooperation on the continent. Consequently, through the protocol relating to the establishment of Peace and Security Council of the African Union, the African Standby Force was established as part of the African Peace and Security Architecture. The Peace and Security Council protocol covers a comprehensive agenda for peace and security. This includes conflict prevention, early warning, preventive diplomacy, peace building, intervention, and humanitarian action, and disaster management. The other components of APCA set up by the PSC protocol include the Continental Early Warning System, the Panel of the Wise, and the Peace Fund. The African Standby Force comprises multinational and multidisciplinary civilian, police, and military components held on standby in their countries of origin in the 5 regions of the African Union. These regions are the East African Standby Force, the Northern Standby Brigade, the West African Standby Brigade, the Central African Standby Brigade, and the South African Standby Brigade. These components stay on standby for rapid deployment at appropriate notice as provided for in the 6 peace support operations scenarios of the African Standby Force. The establishment of the East African Standby Force follows the decision of the Summit of the African Union held in July 2004 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to create the East African Standby Brigade. The Memorandum of Understanding, signed in April 2005, expressly establishes the East African Standby Force as a constituent organization of the African Standby Force. In March 2007, the Council of Ministers for the Defense and Security established a coordination mechanism called ISIFCOM, formerly ISBRICOM. The establishment is based on the past experiences of conflicts in Africa, such as Rwanda genocide, the war in Sudan, the war in Somalia, among others. The Eastern Africa region continues to be faced with challenges of conflict and internal problems impacting on peace and security. In 2014, the Council of Ministers for Defense and Security elevated the East African Standby Force status to a full secretariat. The East African Standby Force Secretariat, in the same spirit, on the 26th day of June 2014, the East African Standby Force Assembly of the Heads of State and Government during the 3rd Extraordinary Summit held in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea, signed the agreement for the establishment of the East African Standby Force as part and parcel of the African Standby Force. In the process of scrutinizing the agreement, the committee noted that the process is of a little consequence since the agreement was already signed by His Excellency the President of the Republic of Uganda in exercise of his constitutionally given mandate. Thus, notwithstanding, the committee met and interacted with the Minister of Defense and Veteran Affairs as the head of the implementing ministry. We read the literature review, which you can all see. The objectives of the agreement, the objective of the East African Standby Force is to carry out in a timely manner the functions of maintenance of peace and security and stability as authorized by the East African Standby Force Assembly and mandated by the Peace and Security Council of the African Union. The legal mandate for the execution of the international treaties, conventions, and agreements, the parent law for the execution and notification of treaties and agreement is Article 123 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. It provides the President or a person authorized by the President may make treaties, conventions, or agreements, all other arrangements between Uganda and any other country, or between Uganda and an international organization or body in respect of any matter. Parliament shall make laws to govern ratification of treaties, conventions, agreements, all other arrangements made under Clause 1 of this article. The law enacted by Parliament in this regard is the Ratification of Treaties Act, Cap 204 of the Laws of Uganda, Section 2, which provides for all treaties shall be ratified as follows: by Cabinet, in case of any treaty other than a treaty referred to in paragraph B of this section, by Parliament, by resolution, where the treaty relates to armistice, neutrality, and all peace, all in the respect of a treaty in respect of which the Attorney General has certified in writing that its implementation in Uganda would require constitutional amendment. Parliament is therefore sought to ratify the agreement in issue under the provisions of Section 2B(1) of the Ratification of Treaties Act. However, like earlier observed, the process is not participatory enough, as Parliament is not required, as Parliament is only required to ratify instruments that have already been executed by the head of state or his lawful delegate. It is crucial that in ratification of all treaties, the public and parliamentary participation are guaranteed in line with Article 38(1) of the Constitution. Article 23(1) of the agreement is to the effect that the agreement shall enter into force provisionally upon signature by the heads of state, all government, but under Article 23(2). The agreement shall definitely enter into force upon deposit of instruments of ratification by a simple majority of member states. Ratification, honorable members, is the confirmation or adoption of an act that has already been performed. I think that one, I explained it in the earlier report. Observations and recommendations. The committee observes that the government of Uganda, in signing the agreement for the establishment of the East African Standby Force and participating in the formation of the constitution of the East African Standby Force, is complying with national objective and directive principle of state policy 28(2), which requires Uganda to actively participate in international and regional organizations that stand for peace and for the well-being and progress of humanity. The Eastern Africa region, represented by the East African Standby Force, is one of the 5 regions of the African peace and security architecture, and is as such developing the standby forces as a component of the African Standby Force. Currently, the East African Standby Force draws its membership from 10 active member states, including Burundi, Comoros, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, Seychelles, Somalia, Sudan, and Uganda, which are signatories to the Memorandum of Understanding on the establishment of the Eastern Africa Standby Force, with the Republic of South Sudan enjoying observer status, which it attained in April 2013. Article 52 and 53 of the Charter of the United Nations recognizes the role of regional arrangements in dealing with such matters relating to maintenance of international peace and security as are appropriate to the regional action. The purpose for the agreement is to establish a mechanism for prevention, management, and resolution of inter- and intrastate conflicts, consultation and cooperation for peaceful settlement of disputes, and capability for response in a timely manner to conflicts in Africa through an operational structure or the effective implementation of decisions to promote regional peace, security, and stability. The signing of the agreement by His Excellency the President of Uganda is consistent with the provisions of the Charter of UN 1945, the Constitutive Act of the African Union, and the protocol relating to the establishment of peace, security, Peace and Security Council of the African Union. Uganda, as a country, has often defaulted on their financial obligations to regional and international bodies and associations. As a committee, we recommend that right from inception, the implementing ministry or department should work with Ministry of Finance to ensure sufficient allocations in the releases from the national budget to meet the country's share of contribution to the budget of the East African Standby Force, to avoid the imposition of sanctions as envisaged in Article 19 of the agreement. And in this regard, Article 23(1) of the agreement is to the effect that the agreement shall enter into force provisionally upon signature by the heads of state, all government, but under Article 23(2), the agreement shall definitely enter into force upon deposit of instruments of ratification by a simple majority of member states. The committee further recommends that this parliament ratifies this agreement in order to enable the executive comply with the requirement of Article 22(2) of the agreement by depositing an instrument of ratification to the director of the Secretariat. The committee recommends that this sitting of the 10th Parliament adopts this report and collectively resolves to ratify the agreement for the establishment of the East African Standby Force signed by the President of Uganda under his constitutional authority on the 26th of June 2014. Right, Honorable Speaker and Honorable Members, I beg to move.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Members, this particular agreement falls within the category of the one we have just handled. I now propose the question for your debate. I propose the question to the motion for adoption of the report of the Sectoral Committee on Defense and Internal Affairs on the proposed ratification of the agreement for the establishment of the East African Standby Force and the subsequent substantive motion for ratification of that agreement. If they want to debate, debate starts now. Yes, I'll start from Kanungu, Ajumani,
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker.
Manjia. Yes.
I wanted to move a motion that this being a straightforward matter and having all the requirements that we need, that I put Mr. Speaker, I move a motion that we adopt the question be put for the motion.
Okay. Thank you, honorable members. Honorable members, that motion is seconded, and it's a requirement of our rules that when such a motion is moved, unless the speaker has reservations. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I did not stand up to second the motion, but rather I wanted to bring to your attention that I have some issues of clarification that I would want to request from the Honorable Minister.
What do I do with the motion? The motion has been moved for that the question be put. I need to put the question, that motion first. And if that motion is carried, then we let that one be. But if it is not carried, then I come to you. Okay? Honourable members, I now put the question to the motion that the question be put. Will those in favor say aye? To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Honourable members, that means I now proceed to put the question to the motion. I now put the question to the motion for adoption of the report of the Sectoral Committee on Defence and Internal Affairs on the proposed ratification of the agreement for the establishment of the East African Standby Force. I put the question to that motion. Will those in favor say aye? To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. I now put the question that the agreement for the establishment of the East African Standby Force be ratified. Will those in favor say aye? To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. This matter has been outstanding for a long time. I thank the committee for bringing it to conclusion, and I thank the House for handling it expeditiously. Thank you. Next item.
Right, Honourable Speaker. Allow me lay the minutes and also related documents on table. Thank you.
Let the records capture that after the event.
Item number 6 on the order paper. Consideration and adoption of the report of the Committee on National Economy on the request by government to guarantee lines of credit of $10 million from the Islamic Development Bank and $16 million from the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, BADEA, for lines of credit to Uganda Development Bank.
Chairperson? Who is the chairperson of National Economy? Debate had started on this particular matter, and can we continue with the debate? If there is no further debate, we conclude the matter. What it means is that the debate conducted so far is satisfactory for this House to take a decision on this motion. Would that be a fair position to take by the House? Honourable members, I put the question. The motion for adoption of the report of the Committee on National Economy on the request by government to guarantee lines of credit $10 million from the Islamic Development Bank and $16 million from the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, BADEA, for lines of credit to Uganda Development Bank. I put the question for the adoption of the report of the committee. Will those in favor say aye? To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Honourable members, I now put the question to the request for the adoption of the request. I put the question that the request by government to guarantee lines of credit of $10 million from the Islamic Development Bank and $16 million from the Arab Bank for Economic Development for lines of credit to Uganda Development Bank be approved. Will those in favor say aye? To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Thank you.
Item number 7 on the order paper. Consideration and adoption of the report of the Committee on Foreign Affairs on Uganda's foreign missions.
Honourable Chair. Chairperson, Committee on Foreign Affairs. On this matter, debate is continuing. Yes.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker. This particular report was presented by the chairperson in this House, but I did notice in the presentation that the executive summary she gave, which was captured on the Hansard, is totally different from what is contained in the report. And in particular, the executive summary tended to divert itself from the realms of the Committee on Foreign Affairs into the realms of the Committee on Statutory Enterprises and Authorities, in recommending that the Minister of Foreign Affairs takes over the management of properties managed by an entity under the Ministry of Finance. So I would implore you, Mr. Speaker, that you direct the clerk to first look at the complaint I've raised and see whether indeed this particular report rhymes with what the executive summary read and whether it was proper for the Committee on Foreign Affairs to digress into the works of another committee.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Two options would arise. Yes, Mbale, municipality on the same issue raised by the member for Ndoro? Same issue?
Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering if we're proceeding normally, because I don't see the chairperson of the Committee on Foreign Affairs. I don't even see the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So I don't think it will be prudent for us to debate the report when the chairperson is not here, the ministers are not here. There are quite a number of issues, Mr. Speaker, that affect this country in countries where we're represented. So we would like that the minister comes on the House and answers most of the questions. There are a number of issues. You can even, Mr. Speaker, recall that just recently there was a list of ambassadors published in the papers that have been appointed. We want the minister to clarify on some of these people who have been appointed. So I would beg that, Mr. Speaker, we defer this debate until the people are in the House so that they can answer our questions. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Let the records reflect those two issues. First, there seemed to be variance between the executive summary presented and the substance of the report of the committee. And on that same line, there seems to be an issue with the recommendations that cuts across mandates and seems to fetter the authority of other institutions of this House. Those are the two issues. We need to harmonize them and proceed. And third, which is last, it's a request for deferral of this debate, since the key people who should guide us on concluding this debate are not in the House. Honorable members, should we defer debate to facilitate these two processes? Debate deferred. Thank you. Next.
Item number 8 on the order paper, motion for presentation, consideration and adoption of the report of the Committee on Physical Infrastructure on the standard gauge railway and light railway transit.
Chair.
Right Honorable Speaker, I first wish to lay on the table a report by the Physical Infrastructure on the standard gauge railway, which is one of the flagship projects being implemented in the country. This report is premised on a comparative study visit the committee undertook at the Ethiopian Railway Corporation in Addis Ababa, where a similar project has been constructed and is currently being operated by the Ethiopian government. I also wish to lay on the table the following supporting documents which were referred to during the drafting of this report. 1. Minutes of proceedings of the committee meetings held. 2. Agreement between the government of Uganda and Kenya for the joint and seamless operations of the Mombasa-Kampala Standard Gauge Railway, November 2016. Joint communique, that's number 3, at the Joint Integration Project Summits in Kigali, Rwanda, Mombasa, Kenya, and Kampala, Uganda. Extract of the Cabinet Memorandum, CT 2014-145, cross brackets, on the ratification of the protocol on the development and operation of the standard gauge railway under the Northern Corridor Integration Projects, Minute 62, open brackets, CT 2015, cross brackets. 5, extract of a Cabinet Memorandum, CT 2015-44, on approval of the standard gauge railway development in Uganda under the Northern Corridor Integration Projects. 6, contract agreement for engineering, procurement, and construction for the Eastern and Northern Standard Gauge Railway Network project between the government of the Republic of Uganda and MS China Harbour Engineering Company Limited of March 2015. 7. Addendum number 1 to the contract for engineering, procurement, and construction for the development of the Eastern and Northern Standard Gauge Railway Network project. And finally, 8. Data sheet for the Standard Gauge Railway bridges along the eastern route, and that is Marawa, Mombasa, as at 31st December 2016. Right Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay.
Mr. Chair, would you like to lay them one by one?
Oh.
Because now we don't know, you have listed 8 documents, but I see one coming on the table.
Okay.
So.
This is the report.
Let the records capture that.
These are the minutes.
Let the records capture the minutes.
This is the joint summers. Sorry?
Proceed, Chair.
Sorry. This is the agreement between the government of Uganda and Kenya for the joint and seamless transport operations of the Mombasa-Kampala Standard Gauge Railway.
Let the records capture the agreement.
This is the joint communique at the Joint Integration Project Summit in Kigali, Rwanda, Mombasa, Kenya, and Kampala, Uganda.
Let the records capture the joint communique.
This is the same. And this. There are 3 papers. There are 3. Kigali, Rwanda. This is joint communique at the Joint Integration Project Summit. 3 papers. And this is the Cabinet Memoranda CT 62 CT 2015. Cabinet Memoranda Minute number 107 CT 2015. I beg to lay.
Let the records capture that.
This is the agreement between the government of Uganda and the Czech, that is China Harbour Engineering Corporation, March 2015. I beg to lay.
Let the records capture that.
This is the addendum to the contract, which is the contract agreement between the government of Uganda and the China Harbour Engineering, addendum number 1. I beg to lay.
Let the records capture that.
This one is the data sheet of standard gauge railway bridges along the eastern route, Marawa, Kampala, as at 31st December 2016. I beg to lay.
Let the records capture that.
Right, Honorable Speaker, can I proceed to present?
Proceed.
This report is on your iPads. Page number 1 is report of the Physical Infrastructure Committee visit to the Ethiopia Standard Gauge Railway and Light Rail Transit projects. Page 2 is composition of the delegation. Page 3 is a list of acronyms and abbreviations. Page 4, that's where the report starts, and I begin with introduction. The physical infrastructure is mandated under Rules 147C and E and 147E and F of the Rules of Procedure of Parliament to oversee, assess, and monitor the performance of the Ministry of Works and Transport and related agencies and departments to ensure compliance with approved plans and programs, and to report to Parliament on their functions. Among the key projects being implemented by Ministry of Works and Transport is the standard gauge railway, with a proposed net length of 1,724 kilometers covering the entire country, and the light rail transit system covering 45 kilometers. The standard gauge railway is being implemented in a phased manner, starting with the eastern route, i.e. Maraba-Kampala, covering 273 kilometers by the Chinese Harbour Engineering Company, brackets Czech. In order to effectively oversee the implementation of the standard gauge railway, the committee undertook a benchmarking visit to the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia to learn from the experiences on both the standard gauge railway network and light rail transit for mass transportation. In accordance with the Rules of Procedure of Parliament, the committee hereby presents its findings for consideration to this August House. Right Honorable Speaker, background. On 1st May 2011, the East African Community States agreed on a regional standard gauge railway protocol to guide the construction of a seamless standard gauge railway network to interconnect all countries in the region. Currently, each of the ES states are at different stages of constructing the standard gauge railway, with Uganda acquiring the right-of-way and compensating the project-affected persons on the eastern standard gauge railway route. Feasibility and other detailed engineering studies to determine the alignment and design are underway for both the standard gauge railway and light rail transit for Greater Kampala metropolitan area. Also, the funding arrangements for the standard gauge railway are in advanced stages, and construction is expected to start soon. The tentative cost of the eastern, northern, western routes of Uganda standard gauge railway is estimated at United States dollars 12.8 billion for the 1,724 kilometers. This network is expected to be single track, class 1 railway for both freight and passenger. The passenger speeds are expected to be 120 kilometers per hour, and the cargo speeds at 100 kilometers per hour, with overhead traction across the entire network. The Greater Kampala metropolitan area light rail transport system is expected to cover 45 kilometers at a tentative cost of US dollars 700 million. The light rail transit design speeds will be 80 kilograms per hour, while operating speed will be 70 kilometers per hour, and it shall have a capacity of 15,000 passengers per hour per direction. On the other hand, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia has completed light rail transit system, and the Addis Ababa, Sebeta, Miesco, Dira, Dawa, Dewera standard gauge route, both of which are similar in nature and scope to those proposed in Uganda. However, Ethiopia is located at a higher altitude compared to Uganda, and Addis Ababa soils are mainly volcanic and inappropriate for construction as compared to Kampala's soils, which are appropriate for construction. The committee deemed it necessary to visit Ethiopia due to the capacity the country had exhibited in the implementation of infrastructure development programs, including standard gauge railway and light rail transit system. Mr. Speaker, sir, objectives. The objectives of the benchmarking were: 1, assess the nature and implementation of the standard gauge railway and light rail projects in Ethiopia, brackets, integration, coordination, linkages among the various responsible agencies, and compare them to Uganda. 2, learn the experiences and success factors encountered during the implementation of the standard gauge railway and light rail transit projects in Ethiopia, including the cost to inform the implementation of the same in Uganda. 3, evaluate the local content in implementation of these projects and how they help to attain sustainability, i.e., Ethiopian local manpower and contractors, local consultants, in comparison with Uganda. And 4, propose improvements to the standard gauge railway and light rail transit projects in Uganda. Approach and methodology. In carrying out this work, the committee interacted with officials from Ethiopian Railway Corporation. During discussions with the Ethiopian Railway Corporation, the committee learned about the experience of Ethiopia during planning, procurement, implementation, supervision, and monitoring of both the standard gauge railway and light rail transit projects. These experiences were compared with Uganda, where an engineering, procurement, and construction contract has been concluded with the contractor and right-of-way acquisition is currently being implemented. The committee visited Ethiopia Light Rail Transit and interacted with its officials on the planning, implementation, and post-construction management and operations of the Addis Ababa light rail transit system. The committee visited the Central Control Center of the light railway transit system and rode on the trains currently in operation on the north-south route in Addis Ababa in order to appreciate the quality of service of the light rail transit. 3, furthermore, the committee visited the Addis Ababa-Dewera portion of the standard gauge railway and used the operations along this route. Lessons drawn from the Ethiopian experience have been compiled into this report and shall inform recommendations for the ongoing process of implementation of the standard gauge railway network and the proposed light rail transit for the Greater Kampala metropolitan area. Findings. 5.1, Ethiopia standard gauge railway project and light rail transit system. Ethiopia has been constructing the Addis Ababa Dewera standard gauge route connecting to Djibouti. The Ethiopian standard gauge railway has been built to Class 2 standard with electric traction across the entire network with passenger speeds of 120 kilometers per hour for passenger and 80 kilometers per hour for cargo. The Addis Ababa Dewera electric standard gauge railway network cost US dollars 3.4 billion and covers a distance of 669 kilometers with a unit cost of US dollars 5 million per track kilometer. The cost of construction of the Addis Ababa light rail transit was US dollars 475 million, covering a network length of 34 kilometers with a unit cost of US dollars 14 million per track kilometer. The Ethiopian Railways Corporation carried out the project in 2 phases, that is from Addis Ababa Shebeta to Mieso and from Mieso to Dewera. There are 16 stations in this railway line, and in the future the number of stations will be 55. Likewise, the Djibouti government constructed part constructed its portion of the standard gauge railway line from the border with Ethiopia at a total cost of US$ 505 million, covering a distance of 100 kilometers with a unity cost of US$ 5.05 million per track kilometer. The Ethiopian light rail transit was completed and a railway manager was contracted to operate and maintain the light rail transit, while local staff were attached to learn and take over after 41 months from the contractors. The contracted companies were Shenzhen and Craig. The Addis Ababa light rail transit covers a distance of 34 kilometers, already mentioned, and serves the metropolitan area of Addis Ababa. Ethiopian Railway Corporation set up a technical advisory bureau to look into an implementation framework for railway in Ethiopia. 6, sir, observations and recommendations. Standard gauge railway network and light rail transit system. 1, class of standard gauge railway network in Uganda here. The committee observes that the Ethiopian standard gauge railway network has been built to class 2 standard with a maximum design speed of 120 kilometers per hour for passenger train and 80 kilometers per hour for cargo train. The annual tonnage of the standard gauge railway network is 25 million tons. On the other hand, Uganda proposes to construct a standard gauge railway network to class 1 standard with the design speeds for passengers of 120 kilometers per hour and the cargo train of 100 kilometers per hour with the annual turnover of 20 million, with tonnage of 20 million. The committee notes that to all intents and purposes, Uganda's proposed standard gauge railway has the same specifications as regards design and operating speeds and is expected to serve the same purpose as Ethiopia and the Kenya networks. Also, from my interaction with the Ethiopian Railway Corporation, the committee established that all standard gauge railways constructed in Africa are at class 2 standards. The committee noted that in South Africa, Morocco, Algeria, and Egypt, which are countries operating standard gauge railway, they are all to class 2 in accordance with the AU protocol. In Africa, there are no railways that have been constructed to class 1 standards due to the high cost of construction, maintenance, operational costs, since the speeds of such trains are in the range of 300 kilometers per hour and are majorly passenger dedicated. Middle-income countries use class 2 railways, while class 1 standard gauge railways have been constructed mainly in developed countries and those aspiring to be developed, such as China, Japan, and the United States. The committee observed that specifications for the standard gauge railway in Uganda are the same as those in Ethiopia and Kenya. Therefore, the railway Uganda is referring to as class 1 railway is actually class 2 as per specifications. The branding of class 2 as class 1 is likely to lead to an inflation of costs. There is no justification for Uganda to refer to its class of railway as class 1 instead of class 2. Moreover, class 2 specifications provide for maximum design speeds of 120 kilometers per hour, and the class of railway is majorly determined by the design speeds. It should be noted that construction of class 2 rather than class 1 railway would lead to a significant reduction in construction costs from the tentative US $12.8 billion currently proposed for building the entire network. The committee observes that the management team has been deliberately misguiding and misleading the country on the actual work to be undertaken on the standard gauge railway. Mr. Speaker, the committee recommends as follows. The government of Uganda should revisit and renegotiate the engineering, procurement, construction contract with CHEC, this is China Harbour Engineering Corporation, for the eastern route with a view of constructing the railway to Class 2 standards as envisaged in the contract. This will reduce the cost of construction for the eastern route from the now tentative US dollars 2.3 billion for a distance of 2.3 US dollars 2.3 billion for a distance of 273 kilometers. Mr. Speaker, sir, the following is the table, a comparative cost track kilometer for standard gauge railway between Ethiopia and Uganda. As you can note from the table, Ethiopia constructed its standard gauge railway at US dollars 5 million per track kilometer. Kenya has constructed its standard gauge railway at US dollars 6.23 million per track kilometer. Now Uganda is proposing to construct, that is in the contract. I quoted this from the current signed contract with the contractor. US dollars 8.2 million per track kilometer. Recommendation number 2. The contracts for the western, they are not yet signed. And the northern route should be 2 Class 2 standards. Number 3, punitive action should be taken against any officials who might be culpable of making misleading claims of the actual work that is going to be done. Right Honorable Speaker, number 2, capacity building for the railway subsector. The committee established that Ethiopia instituted a deliberate program to build the capacity of the Ethiopian Railways Corporation to effectively manage the affairs of railways in the country. It should be noted that until 2007, there was no established legal and institutional framework for management of railways in Ethiopia, and all railway infrastructure was dilapidated. The government of Ethiopia undertook the following steps with regard to the standard gauge railway. Established a legal and institutional framework for management and administration of the railway system. It recruited 630 younger trainee technicians with zero experience but relevant educational background, and these were sent for training to China a year before, were sent for training to China for a year, and were attached to the construction projects upon return to Ethiopia. Now, this one was done 1 year before the construction started. So when construction started, these young people were already here, now engaged in construction. 3, launched railway engineering education program at Addis Ababa Institute of Technology in collaboration with Ethiopia Railway Corporation, targeting 500 graduate students. This is unique and is the only graduate railway education program in Africa. Through this program, 500 students have been trained, and their cost of training was fully covered by government. The program has 3 major schemes at master's level: civil railway engineering, electrical railway engineering systems, and rolling stock engineering. So far, the program has trained 300 graduates at master's level, which implies 300 such topics in the railway subsector. In 2016, the University of Addis Ababa began the process of transforming the Institute of Railway Engineering into a center of excellence in railway engineering with the World Bank support. This was all deliberate and aimed at enhancing the capacity of Ethiopia to procure, implement, supervise, and manage the standard gauge railway network in a sustainable manner. On the other hand, government of Uganda is planning to build the capacity of UPDF in railway engineering, construction, maintenance, and consultancy services. There is no capacity building program for Ugandans who shall be responsible for managing the standard gauge railway and the light rail transit projects in Uganda. Uganda is currently in advanced stages of implementing the standard gauge railway, yet there has been no deliberate effort to build the capacity of local engineers and other required personnel. The UPDF is expected to offer labor to the project contractors and is expected to run construction and supervision processes in the course of implementation of the project. There is no collaboration with the universities in the country to tailor trainings that would ensure sustainability of the railway subsector. Failure to build critical mass of skilled personnel with the capacity to implement, maintain, and manage the railways shall lead to dependency on the foreign expatriates and shall affect the sustainability of the standard gauge railway network. In Uganda, it seems most of the capacity building for contracting and consultants is being planned to be built in the Uganda People's Defense Forces, which has little, if any, capacity. Limited capacity building is planned among the private sector and individuals or other technical government institutions that shall have the responsibility to manage and operate or supervise the standard gauge railway network. The committee established that the standard gauge railway design, review, and supervision consultant is required to employ 70% of the 230 required staff locally, while the contractor is expected to employ 90% of the required staff locally. The deliberate plan to recruit staff locally is commendable for purposes of skills transfer and sustainability of the subsector. However, the committee notes that there is no clear strategy stating how the foreign staffs are expected to transfer the skills and gradually be phased out during the project implementation. In Ethiopia, freshly trained graduates receive same militarized training to instill discipline and hard work in them, rather than the armed forces being directly engaged in the process, like the case is in Uganda. Recommendations of the committee: 1, Ministry of Works and Transport, Education and Sports, Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovation and Ministry of Public Service should immediately undertake an elaborate needs assessment of the available railway-related skills and determine the training gaps needed and develop a strategy for immediate implementation. This strategy for capacity enhancement should immediately be available to the committee to enable it to oversee the implementation of the project. 2, Uganda Railways Corporation and the Ministry of Works and Transport, in collaboration with relevant authorities, should introduce railway engineering at public universities and institutions. A collaboration framework be established with local universities to train and equip students with railway-related skills in Uganda within the next 3 years. All of these graduates should be fully sponsored by government to complete their training courses, since this one is a top priority. 3, the railway engineering graduates should undertake some militarized patriotic trainings for purposes of achieving the necessary discipline and skills required to operate and manage the railways sector. The the steps taken by Ethiopia to equip its personnel in the railway subsector should be emulated by Uganda. In the next 1 year, scholarships should be equitably and transparently be offered to technicians to train abroad in railway-related engineering. We could actually even now train them from Kenya, from Kenya, since construction is already taking place there. 5, a clear exit strategy being incorporated in the contracts of the supervising consultant and works contractor, stating how foreign staff engaged as project consultants and works contractors shall transfer their skills and be phased out during project implementation. Mr. Speaker, sir, recruitment of fresh graduates on the standard gauge railway. Ethiopia has established a policy of recruiting fresh university graduates capable of easily adapting to the new and emerging knowledge and technology that are key to the operations of a modern railway system. Old people may not easily adapt. The zero experience policy targets fresh graduates who are trained to take over the expatriate roles of the contractors and consultants involved in project implementation. There is a clear phased training and succession plan for the local personnel to manage the railway subsector with timelines and milestones that are strictly observed. On our side, Uganda has not yet developed a clear, deliberate policy to recruit and train fresh graduates in the areas of railway management and operations, despite the technology-intensive nature of the work. Indeed, the current recruitments have emphasized, the current recruitments have emphasized experience in railway work, which threatens the acquisition of new and emerging technologies and knowledge in the that the subsector requires. The committee established from Uganda Railways Corporation that its strategic plan provides for a grand strategy for development of technical, human, and other capacities for the railway subsector in the medium term. There are ongoing negotiations with the organizations locally and in South Africa in building partnerships and on training personnel in railway subsector management. The committee recommends as follows. A staff recruitment plan should be developed that ensures that staff with the capacity to learn and adopt new and emerging technologies are recruited. 2, that the Ministry of Works and Transport should ensure that Uganda Railways Corporation capacity building strategy under the strategic plan is funded fully to ensure that adequate personnel are trained to manage the railway subsector. 4, policy and legal framework of railways in Uganda. Mr. Speaker, sir, in Uganda, Uganda Railways Corporation is the body mandated to regulate, construct, operate, and maintain the railway and marine services for the carriage of passengers and goods under the Uganda Railways Act 1992. Under cabinet decision, a project board and a project management unit were formed and are now spearheading the process of planning and implementation of the standard gauge railway in Uganda. This is contrary to the practice in Kenya and Ethiopia, where Kenya Railways Corporation, KRC, and Ethiopian Railways Corporation, ERC, spearheaded the planning, construction, and operations of the standard gauge railway network in those countries respectively. The committee established that in 1999, Cabinet approved a plan for increasing private investment in the operations of Uganda Railways Corporation with the aim of improving its operating efficiency since the corporation was receiving large government subsidies. Consequently, in 2000, privatization and restructuring advisors were appointed to evaluate mechanisms for implementing the first stage of restructuring, and therefore, Uganda Railways Corporation is currently categorized under Schedule 2 of the Non-Performing Assets Recovery Trust Act 1994. The committee established that in order for Uganda Railways Corporation to effectively perform its mandate, this categorization under the mentioned act should be repealed. The Ministry of Works and Transport is yet to develop a national railways policy that would define the roles and responsibilities of the different stakeholders in the subsector. They have not attempted, they are only planning to begin. The committee recommends that Minister of Finance, Planning, Economic Development should immediately amend the NPART Act 1994 to allow URC to effectively perform its mandate. The Minister of Works and Transport should immediately expedite a process of formulation of national railways policy and the accompanying relevant legal framework to guide the processes and activities in the railway subsector. Mr. Speaker, sir, institutional framework for standard gauge railway in Uganda. The committee established that Uganda's institutional framework is guided by regional and national level agreements and protocols. At the regional level, the standard gauge railway is guided by the following: Standard Gauge Railway Protocol, Northern Corridor Infrastructure Project, Joint Ministerial Committee, Standard Gauge Railway Commission, Regional Technical Commission, and Joint Technical Committee. At the national level, the Standard Gauge Railway Framework is composed of the following: 1. Project Board. The Standard Gauge Railway Project Board is chaired by the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Works and Transport, and composed of representatives from several ministries, including Defense, Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Lands, Housing and Urban Development, Justice and Constitutional Affairs, Energy and Mineral Development, and Uganda Railways Corporation. The board is the policy-making organ for the project and has the mandate to supervise the project management unit to ensure that the project is delivered as expected. Now, project management team. This is headed by the Standard Gauge Railway Project Coordinator and is composed of project employees, and most of them were former staff of the Ministry of Works and Transport. And this is what happened in UNR. The committee observes that the Standard Gauge Railway national level institutional framework is disjointed and poorly structured and organized. Whereas Uganda Railways Corporation is the institution mandated to develop the railway subsector in Uganda, the standard gauge railway activities are being spearheaded by a project staff of the Ministry of Works and Transport. The committee was informed that the decision to mandate the Standard Gauge Railway Board management unit to guide the process in Uganda was informed by a cabinet decision. The functions and operations of the Standard Gauge Railway in Uganda are not fully harmonized with those of the Uganda Railways Corporation, as the two agencies are supervised by different ministries. This may in the future complicate management and further development of the railway system in the country, including acquisition of right-of-way. Committee recommendations. We are recommending that Cabinet revisits its decision to mandate a project board and a management unit to spearhead the implementation of the standard gauge railway network in Uganda. 2, that the supervision and oversight of Uganda Railways Corporation should be transferred from the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development to Ministry of Works and Transport. That the Ministry of Works and Transport expeditiously reviews the current institutional framework to ensure that Uganda Railways Corporation plays a prominent role in the implementation of the standard gauge railway network as per its mandate in the railway subsector. 6, stakeholder management and involvement. The committee notes that Ethiopian Railway Corporation faced challenges ensuring that all relevant stakeholders were actively engaged and involved in the implementation of the standard gauge railway and the light rail transit. Implementation of these projects disrupted several services, and this caused conflict among the different utility companies. This required harmonization of the work of the different stakeholders, and careful stakeholder management was instituted. The committee notes that Uganda's standard gauge railway project is a major undertaking that requires a wide range of stakeholder involvement and consultations during the project planning, development, operations, and management phases. The committee also established that a stakeholder engagement plan and strategies were developed by Ethiopian Railway Corporation to guide the implementation of the project. It was expected that the project works would disrupt several existing or proposed works, like road works, electricity, and water services. This requires harmonization of the works and engagement of all key stakeholders to ensure successful implementation of the project. Mr. Speaker, sir, despite claims by the Minister of Works and Transport to have developed a stakeholder engagement plan, there is poor coordination and involvement of the relevant stakeholders. The Minister of Works and Transport is also yet to enact a national railways policy that would define the roles and responsibilities of the different stakeholders in the subsector. The committee recommends that 1, Ministry of Works and Transport should formulate a clear stakeholder mapping and management plan for the standard gauge railway project and light rail transit systems. 2, regular meetings with various stakeholders should be held and clear roles and responsibilities defined and accountability guidelines agreed upon so that each stakeholder is held responsible for her actions or inactions. 3, the various agencies should harmonize the relocation of their services with clear timelines. All future plan developments should be identified early and integrated in the plan during construction of the standard gauge railway and light rail transit projects. Post-construction management of the standard gauge railway project and light rail transit system. The committee notes that post-construction management is the key to success of a modern railway. It requires the services of an experienced manager with a pedigree in management and maintenance of railways. Ethiopia has contracted Shenzhen Metro Group and China Railway Corporation Limited to operate and maintain the light rail transit on a 3-year contract with clear milestones and timelines to be achieved. The number of expatriate staff is expected to be progressively reduce over this period as locals are trained and prepared to take over the management and operational roles. There is close supervision to ensure that the locals are learning, and a number of the expatriate staff are expected to leave the country and return to China at the end of each year. The Ethiopian Railway Corporation monitors the achievement of timelines and milestones to ensure compliance by both the trained personnel and expatriates. Uganda is in the preliminary stages of implementation of its standard gauge railway project. Lessons from post-construction management of the standard gauge railway in Ethiopia are key for Uganda to adopt and use in the future. Now, committee recommendations. A post-management strategy be designed for the Uganda standard gauge railway with the clear timelines and milestones and exit strategy for the expatriate staff. 2, there should be clear mechanisms for monitoring the implementation of the strategy, and punitive measures should be designed to deter the managers from non-conformity. Source of power for the standard gauge railway. The Ethiopian Railway Corporation informed the committee that the Class 2 standard railway that uses electric traction requires adequate power supply from at least 2 independent and reliable sources. The 2 independent sources would ensure that there is a reliable power supply for the operation of the projects. In addition, there should be a generator backup in the event of failure of the 2 power sources. Uganda's planned standard gauge railway corridor and light rail transit corridor are not fully electrified at the moment, despite plans to use electric traction for the trains. Some of the areas along the corridor are currently not connected to the national electricity grid, and this would pose sustainability and reliability challenges to the operations of the services. The committee established that discussions are underway to use power from Simba and Narubali stations for the standard gauge railway traction substations across the country. I think this one should be the Eastern Line. Both Isimba and Narubali are 2 independent sources which are located in the Usoga sub-region, with Narubali complete while Isimba is still undergoing construction. However, it is unlikely that power from these 2 dams would supply the entire standard gauge railway network across the country effectively and efficiently. There are no contingency plans to provide for generator backup in the event of failure. The committee strongly recommends that 1, Ministry of Works and Transport, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development work together to ensure that the entire SGR corridor is provided with adequate power supply. For purposes of reliability, the Ministry of Energy and Minerals Development and the Ministry of Works and Transport should work out modalities of connectivity of the corridor to the 2 independent power sources and have a standby generator in place for use during emergency power blackouts. The construction of the Simba Dam should be expedited to ensure that there will be adequate power supply for the standard gauge railway network. 2, connectivity to other power sources across the country should be made in order to ensure effective and efficient power supply across the entire SGR network in Uganda. 3, this report on the modalities of electrification of the proposed standard gauge railway corridor should be availed to this committee within 6 months of adoption of this report. Right Honorable Speaker, right of way acquisition. The Ethiopian Railway Corporation informed the committee that land tenure system in Ethiopia is that land belongs to the state. However, prior to the occupation of the land by government, extensive negotiations with the various stakeholders are held. Agreement on the cost of compensation and relocation plan for the occupants must be reached prior to utilization of land by government. A clear relocation plan and business plan must be availed to the project affected persons to ensure that they utilize the compensation funds properly and therefore have an acceptable standard of living after compensation. The funds for the compensation are deposited with the local authorities that supervise the resettlement of the PAPs. Regular audits are undertaken by independent audit firms to ensure that all funds for resettlement, relocation, or compensation of the PAPs was well utilized, and this ensures transparency in the process of right-of-way acquisition. Uganda currently uses the guidelines of Section 77 of the Land Act 1998, as amended in 2010, for the computation of compensation requirements for the PAPs. Valuation of land and property is undertaken to assess and compute the compensations due to the PAPs within the right-of-way based on the provision of the relevant laws. The crops, land, developments are assessed and the project-affected persons paid accordingly. However, there is no clear requirement for relocation or management of the compensation received by the persons affected. Uganda is currently in advanced stages of the amendment of the law that determine the acquisition of land for the right-of-way. Committee recommendations. It's one recommendation that there should be adequate community engagement and sensitization on the use of compensations received by persons affected. 10, local content and quality control for the standard gauge railway. The committee established that discussions have taken place between the government of Uganda and local steel manufacturing companies to ensure that the steel for the construction shall be obtained locally. Government of Uganda has guaranteed purchase of local steel for the project for local manufacturers. Cement for the projects shall also be purchased from local manufacturers. The committee established that in order to ensure quality of the local available construction materials, government plans to establish laboratories for materials testing to ensure conformity to the quality control requirements and standards. Uganda National Bureau of Standards is expected to be resourced to effectively determine the quality of materials used for the project. The committee commends Government of Uganda for its deliberate efforts to utilize locally available materials for the construction of the standard gauge railway network across the country. The committee recommends the following. 1, a clear quality control and management strategy for the standard gauge railway network should be developed and implemented judiciously. 2, UNBS and the Central Materials Laboratory of Ministry of Works and Transport should be adequately resourced to acquire the required materials testing equipment to service the construction needs of the project. 3, an inventory of the equipment requirements by these agencies should be developed and shared with the committee within 3 months of adoption of this report, and the Ministry of Works and Transport should ensure that the procurement processes for acquisition of this equipment is expeditiously undertaken. Right Honorable Speaker, conclusion. The comparison of this project between the two countries of Uganda and Ethiopia reveals glaring differences. Much as Ethiopia had to deal with a very difficult terrain, the cost involved was much lower than the one being quoted under the Ugandan project. With a total length of 969 kilometers, I'm repeating this, the Ethiopians completed their standard gauge railway project at a total cost of US dollars 3.4 billion and US dollars 5 million per truck kilometer. The Ugandan standard gauge railway project of Maraba to Kampala, which is 273 kilometers, is quoted as US dollars 2.3 billion, which translates to a total cost of US dollars 8.42 million per truck kilometer. The same can be said of the light rail transit, where Ethiopians managed theirs at a cost of US dollars 475 million, covering a total distance of 34 kilometers. Comparatively, the Greater Kampala Metropolitan Area Light Rail Transit System is expected to cover 45 kilometers at a tentative cost of US dollars 700 million. You can also compare. There are huge differences in cost consideration. There are huge differences in cost considering that the Ugandan terrain is considerably fair for construction. Our soils are more stable. More important to note is that the specifications being quoted for the standard gauge railway in Uganda are the same as those in Ethiopia. Therefore, the railway Uganda is referring to as Class 1 railway. For us, we think it is actually Class 2, as per specifications. The branding of Class 2 as Class 1, therefore, raises a lot of questions as it is likely to lead to an inflation of costs. There is no justification to refer to its, there is no justification for Uganda to refer to its class of railway as Class 2 when it is actually, as Class 1 when it is actually Class 2. Like already highlighted, Class 2 specifications provide for a maximum design of 120 kilometers per hour, and the class of railway is majorly determined by the design speeds. Construction of Class 2 would lead to a significant reduction in the construction costs. Other pertinent issues like right-of-way acquisition, post-construction management, and stakeholder management and involvement are highlighted in this report with clear lessons to draw from Ethiopian experience. Maybe in addition to that, you can also note the confusion in the institutional framework, because it's quite very important. My prayer is that the recommendations suggested in this report are adopted for a more cost-effective and efficient implementation of this important project. Right, Honorable Speaker, I beg to report.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair, for that very detailed and elaborate report. I'll be proposing the question shortly. Honorable members, in the public gallery this afternoon, we have a delegation of students from Handong Global University, South Korea. They're being led by Dr. Yong Gil Lee, Vice Chancellor of Kumi University, and Ms. Sharon Brown, President of Malco Institute of Technology, and are in Uganda to present a project they are undertaking in Kumi University. In Kumi District, represented by Honorable Amoding Monica and Honorable Iluko Charles. I think they have left, but we will acknowledge them in the absence. They have already left. We also have a delegation of staff from the National Assembly of Kenya. They're here on a one-day benchmarking visit under the auspices of the East and Southern African Management Institute. Please join me in welcoming them. You're welcome. Honorable members, that is the report of the Committee of Physical Infrastructure on this issue of the standard gauge railway. Can I propose the question for debate? I now propose the question to the motion for adoption of the report of the Committee on Physical Infrastructure on the standard gauge railway and light railway transit. I propose that question for your debate. Honorable members, you will recall that all references to light railway was stated as right railway. So the records show that where there was right, it was light. For purposes of the people transcribing the Hansard. Yes, debate starts now. And can we just debate? Procedure? Yes, procedure.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Speaker. Right Honourable Speaker, you recall on this very floor, we took a motion for an investigation of the standard gauge railway. And indeed, a report was laid on the floor of this House. That very report by the Select Committee on Standard Gauge Railway was laid before this House, and it was awaiting debate. And now we have the committee coming up with a report, a separate report, before we took a position on that very Select Committee, which was adopted by this very House. Right, Honourable Speaker, the procedure I'm raising, whereas I welcome the committee's effort, but procedurally, if this House sits and resolves to set up a Select Committee, it brings a report, it is tabled, and before it is debated, adopted, or otherwise, now another similar report is brought. How shall we proceed on this matter, Right Honourable Speaker? Because ordinarily, first come, first serve. That one which came first should have been disposed of to see if the issues that were being raised in the Select Committee are still relevant, are still pending. Then we can receive this as any other normal committee report. And I would imagine that a Select Committee would take more emphasis because it is special and it should be handled in that very manner, Right Honourable Speaker. And I would have imagined the clerk would have furnished your office with that information that indeed there is a matter pending for debate and adoption by this committee, Right Honourable Speaker. So procedurally, how do we proceed in view of the two, Right Honourable Speaker?
Thank you, Honourable Member, for Remiyaga. I recall that a select committee indeed was set up. I think it was under the chair of a member for Nachifuma, if I recall correctly. And it also went to Ethiopia and other places and came back. I never had what happened to the report, but that was a select committee of the 9th Parliament. The technical issue that I need to deal with is whether work of a select committee can be saved. That I need to come back to. I need to consult on that. Can a select committee work of a parliament that has gone, can its work be carried forward? A select committee, not an institutionalized committee of the House. I need to look at that a little more and then come back to the House that next week. Okay, so that we are properly guided on how to proceed with this matter. So in light of that, we'll defer debate. And then see how, if we can harmonize the two, and then proceed that way, so that we don't start and then we go back on the same issue. Thank you. That's how we'll proceed, members. We like proceeding like on the railway, orderly. We don't like... This is the railway, it should be smooth, and so it's concluded. It's concluded, Honourable, please. Next week, I'll seek guidance and then make a guidance on this particular issue, and then we see we can proceed with the debate. So debate, deferred. There was the issue of, please. There was a report that was on item 3. Can we go back to that?
Item 3 on the order paper. Motion for presentation, consideration and adoption of the report of the Public Accounts Committee on the report of the Auditor General on the health sector for financial year 2014-15.
Chair, I apologize. I was looking at Honorable Angelino Sege as the chair. I didn't know there was a chair ready to proceed. Please proceed, Chair.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker. Mr. Speaker and honourable members, I beg to present the report of the Public Accounts Committee on the report of the Auditor General on the health sector for the financial year 2014-15.
Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the minutes of the committee for the same report.
Let the records capture that.
Mr. Speaker and honorable members, the Public Accounts Committee at the beginning of this financial year was allocated 87 entities which fall under 16 sectors of government. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to report that the Public Accounts Committee has done about 80% of its work, and soon we'll be presenting a bush of reports to this Parliament. Mr. Speaker,
I remember, what would you be meaning by that? A bush of reports.
Mr. Speaker, I intended to mean that there will be so many reports that are coming because they are largely ready.
You see, a bush is not necessarily clean, so you need to be... Proceed, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today we are presenting the biggest sector, which is health, consisting of 15 entities. Right Honorable Speaker and members, the Public Accounts Committee considered the Auditor General's report for the financial year 2014-15 on the health sector as mandated by Rule 162.2 of the Rules of Procedure and Article 90 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. Mr. Speaker, the report covers audit queries of the Auditor General's report for the year ended 30th June 2015 in respect of the health sector. This comprised of the Ministry of Health, Mulago National Referral Hospital, Butabika Hospital, China-Uganda Friendship Nagul Hospital, the regional referral hospitals being Mbale, Moroto, Soroti, Jinja, Gulu, Lira, Fort Portal, Hoima, Mbarara, Arua, and the Uganda Heart Institute. Mr. Speaker, the committee interfaced with the accounting officers and also had physical impromptu visits to most of these hospitals. Mr. Speaker, this report has been uploaded and it's quite voluminous, and therefore I beg to go through the summary of the report with a few references to the main report body. On that, we'll probably save our time.
Proceed, Chair.
Glaring salient features, undeclared source of funds. Under the Uganda Sanitation Fund Program annual report for the period revealed that since project inception in July 2011, the project had received a total of $1,885,625 for purposes of grants and procurements. The corresponding cumulative expenditure, however, amounted to $2,417,609.28, creating an excess expenditure of $531,984.28, about 2 billion shillings. The source of funding for this excess could not be ascertained. Refund to Global Fund. Although Uganda shillings 3,198,224,060 had been refunded, investigations revealed that only $1,895,617,227 was refundable, and only a total of Uganda shillings 23,479,000 had been recovered from the individuals involved and remitted to the consolidated fund. Unutilized funds. Under the tuberculosis component, the committee found unutilized funds amounting to Uganda shillings 2,625,487,180 brought forward from the previous year. During the year, funds totaling to Uganda shillings 18,131,924,330 were received, resulting into a total of Uganda shillings 20,757,411,510 available for use, of which Uganda shillings 14,898,067,350 was spent, leaving 5,859,344,160 unutilized. You can imagine. Unaccounted for advances on drugs under the Uganda Sanitation Fund project. Mr. Speaker, the audit reveals that Uganda shillings 274,961,905 advanced to various project staff and sub-grantees remained unaccounted for. Land grabbing at Butabika Hospital. While the hospital management, NEMA, and environmental police were in the process of completing eviction of the enclosures, the Inspector General of Police physically halted the exercise and declared funds under the Uganda Sanitation Project. Failure to declare US $360,000, about 1.3 billion Uganda shillings, in the financial statement is a clear picture of how gross corruption with impunity has become in the health sector. Recycling of accounting officers. Accounting officers who have become perennial and accounting officers should never be reposted but dropped permanently from public service. And thus, the committee recommends that the PS Minister of Health at the time should be dropped permanently. General observations. Those were the salient features. Mischarge of expenditure. The committee is concerned by the continued practice by most accounting officers to reallocate money within their respective vote items without authority. For the financial year under review, 2014-15, a total of 3 hospitals mischarged the expenditure to the tune of Uganda shillings 726,001,826. This is contrary to the Public Finance Management Act 2015, which requires accounting officers to always seek authorization from the Minister of Finance before reallocating funds within a vote. Mr. Speaker, the committee observes that the accounting officers abuse the law with impunity and calls upon the Permanent Secretary of the Treasury to impose tough sanctions against such accounting officers with the mischarge query as provided for in the PFMA and other laws. Mr. Speaker and honorable members, unaccounted for advances. The committee found that a total of Uganda shillings 616,397,000 481 spent by several officers remained unaccounted for by the end of the financial year, contrary to financial regulations that require all expenditure to be accounted for within 60 days. This can be an indicator that the activities which money was advanced have not been carried out. Poor planning and budget management. The committee notes that not all monies budgeted for were released by the Ministry of Finance, and even the monies released are not properly utilized because of mischarges. The committee is concerned that this impairs service delivery. Even with the hindsight that as a country we run a cash budget, we would expect to see coordination and adjustments as we go along. Encroachment on hospital lands. The committee observes that many hospitals are existing without land titles. In some cases, hospital lands have been encroached on, and trespassers have erected permanent structures without any challenges from the hospitals. The committee further observed some cases where private individuals are in possession of titles of land where hospitals are sitting. Understaffing. Right Honorable Speaker and honorable members, not a single hospital is fully staffed, many being at about 45 to 50%, and lack critical staff like surgeons and physicians. The committee is concerned about continuous lack of critical staff in many hospitals. This problem is exacerbated by staff who, upon admission, the public service failed to report their respective workstations. There is also incompetence on the part of the Ministry of Public Service and the Health Service Commission in effectively addressing staffing needs of hospitals. Procurement anomalies and poor contract management. The committee observed that the procurement and disposal units of several hospitals do not have the capacity to handle public procurements. This was manifested through violations of procurement procedures and regulations relating to due diligence, bid evaluations, and contract management. Mr. Speaker, a case in point is the Nagulu Hospital. Payments for construction works without a payment certificate. Review of the contract for construction of the drugstore, together with the payment records, revealed that a sum of Uganda shillings 453,849,200, representing 60% of the contract sum, was paid for works estimated at only 30%. The overpayment was attributed to lack of certificates of works done. It was further noted that the work stalled after the KCCA authorities stopped the construction because of lack of approved plans. The accounting officer explained that the payment was based on progress reports by the contract manager. The contract had expired and was re-engaged, but he emphasized that the contractor would be re-engaged upon getting approval from KCCA. There was an attempt to recover the funds. Mr. Speaker and honorable members, the committee observed: 1, contrary to the response of the accounting officer, that there is no evidence that the advance payment was recovered. Further review revealed that the architectural plans had not been approved by KCCA and the contract had expired. 3, the hospital further made 30% payment for all the works, including the preliminary works. The payment was illegal because it was made in the absence of the certificate of completion. 4, the initial contract was exited and a new contract was to be engaged. 5, the management of the hospital allowed commencement of civil works without approved plans. Recommendations. The committee recommends that the funds overpaid to the contractor of Uganda shillings 150 million be recovered from Dr. Nadumba Edward, who was the accounting officer, for having made an illegal payment without certificates of completion. Conditions of hospitals. Mr. Speaker and honorable members, some of our hospitals are more sick than the patients. The committee notes that there is a general state of decay in the infrastructure of the hospitals. Despite some hospital wards being over 50 years old and have been condemned as inhabitable, the hospitals still use such facilities. Most equipment in hospitals are non-functional. This affects service delivery. Lack of essential drugs and sundries. The committee observed that despite the reforms in the procurement of drugs for public health facilities, there are still challenges in procurement of drugs, resulting into perpetual shortages in most hospitals. This problem is attributed to failure on the part of the national medical stores to meet the orders of many health units and budgeting implications. Mr. Speaker and honorable members, this is clearly buttressed by the case in Mulago Hospital. Drugs supplied to Mulago Hospital. 1, fixed budget allocation for essential medicines and health supplies. The audit revealed that the annual budget allocation of 11,365,600,000 for essential medicines and health supplies for Mulago National Referral Hospital had remained constant since financial year 2011-2012, despite the remarkable increase in the number of patients over the same period from 1.3 million to 1.6 million, about 20% increment. The accounting office explained that the current budget was too small for the hospital and is expected to worsen when the hospital becomes fully specialized and start providing services like kidney and other organ transplants, where drugs and sundries are very expensive. He further stated that they were liaising with the Ministry of Finance and other key stakeholders in the health sector to improve on the current budget provision for drugs. Committee observations: Mulago, being a national referral hospital, has continuously experienced shortages of essential drugs and medical sundries. The committee is concerned that such inadequate supplies may lead to unnecessary loss of lives. performance by internal audit. The committee is alarmed by the fact that accounting officers do not implement recommendations of internal auditors. Whereas the key function of the internal audit department is provide advice on internal checks and control systems, the accounting officers, the committee notes that abuse of public funds continues to grow unchecked. Performance by accounting officers. Mr. Speaker and honorable members, the committee noted with concern the poor performance by some accounting officers, particularly in respect of failure to respond to management letters from the Auditor General, poor preparation and response to audit queries, late submission of documents at the time of audit, failure to act on recommendations of Public Accounts Committee and certain recommendations of Parliament. Unsatisfactory performance by contractors. The committee notes several cases where performance of contractors was unacceptable. The serious cases included fraud, poor workmanship, and slow progress of work on account of inefficiency, inadequate equipment, and poor planning. There are also cases where late release of funds by the Ministry of Finance resulted into delays in effecting payments with the resultant penalties and interest. Mr. Speaker and honorable members, that is largely the summary of the Public Accounts Committee report on the health sector. But I would like to implore you, honorable members, that this report is uploaded on the system, on our iPads, and it's quite voluminous, but the details, you'll find them very particular and very touching. Mr. Speaker, just conclude with two issues. One is that I strongly believe the Health Committee will be coming here with a very particular report. However, I think our country needs to begin focusing and moving from the current health service policy to the insurance policy. Mr. Speaker, when you move, we had an opportunity, and honorable members, I would like to join me in a very particular way, in a very, very special way, to appreciate the members of the Public Accounts Committee. We drove at night most of the time and worked during the day. And we drove across the entire country. I would honestly like you to join me, Mr. Speaker and members, to appreciate this committee. Finally, Mr. Speaker, there is a very disturbing trend where there is selective, unbalanced, or unequitable release of funds by Ministry of Finance to different entities. Some entities will get 100% of their budget, some will get 40%, others will even get 35%. And you keep wondering, when we pass the budget, we appreciate that we run a cash budget. But the release of these funds should be equitable. There should be some formula. Because for instance, these hospitals, they are spread across the country and they affect all of us. So I think that should be noted and taken very, very seriously. Mr. Speaker and honorable members, I appreciate the support that we received from the Office of the Speaker. I would like to appreciate the support that we received from the Office of the Clerk with the staff that we had. We have several staff that support the committee. Mr. Speaker, it's my singular honor to appeal to members of Parliament to adopt this report, and my prayer that indeed the health sector improves. Mr. Speaker, now I beg to lay the report of the Public Accounts Committee on the report of the Auditor General on the health sector for the financial year 2014-2015. I beg to lay, Mr. Speaker.
Let the records capture that. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for this report. Honorable members, as you will notice from the flow of this report, it's a hybrid report, the way I've understood it. It's not a typical accountability report where you are saying so and so took this kind of money and must be held accountable. That has come, but also the aspect of operational, or rather sectoral issues of the health sector. So it's a hybrid report. I don't know how we are going to proceed with the debate because there are no specifics of the accountability issues. Maybe it's in the detail where identification of funds lost or things like that. And then we come also to the sectoral issues that the chair says might also be supported by an additional presentation from the chair of the Committee on Health. So how do we proceed? Do I propose and we debate this matter? Yes, Mbale Municipality.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Committee of Public Accounts Committee for the good work they are doing on bringing those who have stolen, who have misappropriated funds that are given to them by government, taxpayers' money. Mr. Speaker, of course, the chairman touched different sectors. I want to go to Naguru Hospital, the hospital which was built by Chinese. Mr. Speaker, Mulago Hospital was put on hold and under repairs.
Are you debating now?
Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Speaker.
I haven't proposed because I thought you had an intervention on the issue I'd raised. Okay, if you are going to debate, let me, yes, on the preliminary issues, yes, Rubanda.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. Right Honorable Speaker, the reporting by the Auditor General has over the years improved. When you look at most of the reports now, the aim is on systems improvement. In other words, you identify weaknesses the auditee is facing and try to bring them out with a view of helping the auditee to improve systems. I'm sure that's why you are seeing a hybrid of the operational issues vis-a-vis the financial issues.
Yes, yes.
And I would beg the House to debate the report with this view in mind, that the modern reports now do not only report on the funds lost or funds not properly used, but they go beyond to look at other weaknesses the entities face. I'm sure with this clarification, Mr. Speaker, the debate can proceed now.
Thank you very much. But you'll also notice that the debate will not be very different from a debate on the report from the Committee on Health. That is where the challenge is. Because when the Committee of Health will report, it will be almost the same report. So how do you distinguish now the issues of accountability and operational issues? Which one is which? I'm just looking through. Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think I was overcautious over our time, because when you look at our observations and recommendations, they are actually very particular on who should be punished, who should be charged, who should be prosecuted, who should be dismissed. There are a number of issues, but we thought it would take really a long time for the House to go word by word for several pages. Yeah, thank you.
True, that's why I was raising the issue. Are we debating also the operational things which might come from the sectoral angle and deal with real accountability issue that comes from an accountability committee, or what are we going to do? I was just asking. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, the substance of the accountability committee reports is on the financial aspects. In other words, who should be accountable for the funds not properly used? And then other matters also come in. And when you look at our recommendations, they actually put sanctions on the responsible persons for the funds not properly used. And that's where the emphasis should be. And then other matters also come in along the debate.
Thank you. With that guidance, now can I propose the question and we start the debate? Honourable members, I now propose the question to the motion for adoption of the report of the Public Accounts Committee on the report of the Auditor General on the health sector for financial year 2014-2015. Question is proposed and debate starts now. I'll start from Mbale Municipality, who has already started, then I come to Kapele Byong.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Public Accounts Committee, of course, looks at the issues that come from the Auditor General. And our health sector is the most affected one. Because what people in this country want is to have medicine in the hospitals. But when you go to all these hospitals, look at Mulago Referral Hospital. The equipments that were bought many years ago in the 60s during the Obote time, they have broken down. You look at the cancer machines that people have been crying for. There's nothing functioning in Mulago Hospital. Now, they made it worse when they started repairing Mulago Hospital and everybody was transferred to Naguru Hospital. So you find the hospital overcrowded. And the Ministry of Health did not even post workers, doctors, health workers to Naguru Hospital. You find the line going up the main road. So the situation is so bad. But then you find the officials in the hospital stealing the money. And that's why I want to ask members of this House that those who took money in Naguru Hospital and all these hospitals, they must pay back that money because they make our people suffer. Now, I wanted to find out, even in my own hospital in Bali, where, Mr. Speaker, I as a member of parliament has gone to the extent of buying mattresses, beds, wheelchairs to deliver to the hospital. And moreover, this is a government referral hospital. This is a government referral hospital. Everything, we pass budgets here on this floor of parliament to make sure that medicine is put in all these hospitals. But at times, what is shocking is the medicine that comes from Entebbe medical stores has even expired. It makes me feel so bad because I participated in signing an agreement of the Danes giving us medicine in Entebbe medical stores. Essential drugs program. But the medicine comes in and it expires in the hospital. Delivered to the hospital when it has already expired. So the Ministry of Health should put in emphasis to make sure that our hospitals function. That people get the medicine, that there's equipment. Otherwise, there's nothing that people want, but they want medicine in the hospital. So those found culpable, they should be punished. And this House should adopt and pass. The recommendation is brought by the Public Accounts Committee. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Kapele Byong.
Mr. Speaker, when we start to discuss issues pertaining health in this country, one feels like you would wish to transfer out of this country to another country. Because the issues of health are at the heart of every nation. But Mr. Speaker, when you look at the issues that have been raised by the Public Accounts Committee about the accounting officers not adhering to the advice offered by internal audit, it therefore tells you that they are violating the guidelines required to protect the resources. Mr. Speaker, who appoints accounting officer is the chief executive. Where is the problem? Mr. Speaker, we cannot correct issues, problems affecting health unless this parliament works on the systems that must be put in place to fight corruption in Uganda. Very strong systems. That's where we must begin from. And these systems must be tabled by the executive. They are the chief implementers of all the programs in the country. You cannot run the country without putting very strong systems that can guide the implementation and policies so that services are achieved by the ordinary Ugandans. Now, how can essential drugs be missing in the hospitals? How can the meager resources allocated to hospitals get lost in the eyes of the executives? It tells you about the absentia or weak systems that are put in place to control, to prevent the looting of resources that are meant to the ordinary people. Now, this parliament ends at appropriating resources. Now, who else must do the other part? I would like to, in a humble way, to put to this parliament. Even when we sit here, know for sure we have shame in the eyes of the public of Ugandan citizens. How does this shame come about? The executives has let us down. The executive has let us down by not putting strong measures to control the exploitation, the abuse of resources, public resources. Mr. Speaker, that is where the problem is. We as parliament do not do the daily implementation. We do not on daily basis, but it's the executive. And you can see the Public Accounts Committee giving a report. Billions of shillings are lost. Where we come from, the hospitals, the health center 4 hospitals, the health center 3 hospitals, they have no drugs, they have no equipment, the theaters are not functioning. In Kaplebiong, we have no theater functioning. It is a civil society organization trying to rehabilitate the theater. Now, is this a country you can be proud? And yet the ordinary citizens pay taxes every day in billions of shillings and money is misused. Honorable Speaker, I find your work very difficult to sit here. Presiding a parliament who's trying its best to approve resources, but everyday reports come, no accountability. This has not been done. Mr. Speaker, my humble appeal to the Parliament of Uganda. I call upon this Parliament, we must go extra mile to address this without putting our political affiliations at the center. We must put Uganda at heart and tackle the problem in Uganda. And before I conclude, this country is no better than the Uganda of 60s during the UPC government in terms of services. I am not afraid to say, during that time of the 60s, This country was a pride of Africa. What is happening now with the 24 trillion to 34 trillion? We cannot afford equipment in the hospital. Where is money going? Money of this country has been looted by the people who are here pretending that they are in charge. I'm very sorry to say this. How can you stand before the people, you are a leader, when you cannot afford an aspirin? Mr. Speaker, and the 10th Parliament, I want to raise this as I go to retire to my seat. My humble appeal to the executive, all these messages we see about corruption, all that, must be put right to the executive. Parliament has done its part. Executive, remove this country from shame. The rest of Africa is now looking at us. The rest of Africa. What has bewitched the Ugandans? You Ugandan people, you take colossal taxes from the ordinary people. You cannot pay back in return terms of medical services. Why? And yet you can take your children to treat abroad. You can afford to pay money at a very high cost to treat yourselves. But the ordinary Ugandans who pay taxes, you pay them by looting the resources in the public coffers. And there is no measure to control that. Even shame, some people cannot feel now. And you find them drive along the streets. You find them counting bungalows. Honorable Speaker, this is the country we call Uganda. I pity with this parliament. And tomorrow when the members of parliament return to their constituencies are wiped out by voters that they have failed to deliver. And yet the problem is not with the members of parliament. The problem is with the team which is in charge over resources. We don't sit to divide the resources at the center. We only appropriate here. What happens that you are not able to put an iron arm to ensure the money allocated to health sector is directly delivered to the ordinary people? Where is the weakness? You have the police, you have the IGG. Where is the problem? Honorable Speaker,
Procedure.
I am now going to sit. But I tell you, Honorable Speaker,
Please sit. Procedure.
I tell you, Honorable Speaker, the problems, the problems in health and across all other sectors can only be put right if the executives accept to put this problem right. It cannot be put by anybody. It is the executive who is letting Ugandans down, and they must be pointed for this weakness. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chen from Kapelebiong. The Honorable Member made a statement to the effect that accounting officers are appointed by the Chief Executive. And I'm supposing that the Chief Executive is referring to is the President. Accounting officers are appointed by the Secretary to the Treasury. A permanent secretary may be appointed by the President, but that does not make that person automatically an accounting officer until the Secretary to the Treasury appoints that person an accounting officer for that financial year. So let the records bear what the operations and the actual things are.
Procedure.
I'll go to Kumi.
Procedure.
Procedure?
Yes.
Yes, procedure from Magago.
Thank you, the Right Honorable Speaker. And I would like to thank the chair who made a report today. The Right Honorable Speaker, my concern is something I'd wanted to speak on when you inquired as to whether we are proceeding rightly. The issue for me is that, one, is that the LSEC, the auditor's report, with respect to the health sector is a very important report that the public is very interested in. When I look at the front page, the ministers who are responsible for this sector are not actually in the House. And I've had a lot of valuable feedback from the members who are submitting. I know that there might be a little of government business around, but given the concerns we have seen in the media, among others, I'm wondering whether it would be procedurally right to proceed with all this valuable feedback without these ministers actually being in the House. The second point, Right Honorable Speaker, is that...
Still procedure?
Yes, the still procedure. I know that you had raised it previously, and the chair of the committee indicated that there's a lot of finer detail in the report. My fear is that given the way, the summary that he gave, and he alluded to the fact that he did not go into the details, my fear is that we might end up debating this report without actually capturing a lot of finer detail that I believe is very critical for us to make a considered opinion about the issues that are being raised. So my proposal was that if it is procedurally right, we could actually defer this debate to a time when these ministers are in, to a time when members have concretely consulted with respect to the details that are in this report. So those are my procedural concerns. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Honorable Member, would you like to rule on the procedural matter? Honorable members, the rules anticipated this kind of things. Actually, all reports of Parliament, once presented, sometimes should be given according to the rules for the debate to be conducted when members are fully abreast of the facts and details of the report. I was hoping that this would have come at the beginning, especially when the chair was very clear. He said, I've given a summary of the report. That means the details we have not been exposed to, and we have not had the opportunity to look at it. So I was hoping that that would have been raised at the beginning so that we could have proceeded properly. I don't know whether we are able to debate the details of this report, or as requested, maybe members pour over it and then come back to it. Yes, Kanungu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this report, we were supposed to discuss it yesterday. We had it on our iPads, and at the time they deferred. For us who have iPads, it was there, others it was not showing. Me, I had it, but I had not read through. So the speaker who presided yesterday said that we shall discuss it today when everybody is ready with the report. And I believe some colleagues who wanted to discuss came when they were ready with it. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it would be procedurally right that we continue and discuss this report.
Let me have a chair, then I come to you.
Thank you so much, Right Honorable Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the enthusiasm of the members and the interest that they are putting in this report. But I would like to inform the House that this report was first uploaded in December. It has been on our iPad since December when it was ready. And probably that shows us that sometimes we are too busy to look at the documents that we should look into. Now my question is, what is the guarantee that we are going to be able to read through and be prepared for debate? Because more reports are coming. I would just beg that as the debate is going on, look through the report, pick out the issues. You are not going to debate on all the points. Pick out one issue and debate, and let's proceed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Rubanda?
Mr. Speaker, sir, looking at the mood in the House, and also considering that the matter under debate touches our lives, it's important that members be given time to appreciate how the funds appropriated to Ministry of Health are being managed. That notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, there is an issue which was raised on whether we can continue with this kind of debate with the absence of ministers or not. Ministers of Health, whether we can continue with the debate when ministers of health are absent or not. Mr. Speaker, sir, we need to note that this House receives various kinds of reports. Some reports come from the sectors and sectoral committees, and some reports come from the accountability side. Those are reports from the parliamentary accountability committees of parliament. These reports like this one, which is from the Public Accounts Committee, we expect feedback by government through a treasury memoranda. I am sure this is where the role of the minister is paramount. And Mr. Speaker, I thought the House needed to be informed about how the feedback from parliamentary accountability committees comes back to this House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. That was the second issue we're going to deal with. There was another one. So what do we do, honorable members? What do we do? Yes, honorable.
Right, Honorable Speaker, thank you very much. There were conflicting reports on the floor of the House this afternoon regarding this report that is now the subject of debate. To wit, that the report was uploaded way back in December, and also it was not uploaded, or it was uploaded, but for some it could not be accessed, and so on. Well, that points to one thing, Right Honorable Speaker, I think, that indeed not all of us here are actually ready to give due attention and due debate to this report. It would therefore call, Right Honorable Speaker, for a bit of time so that maybe members go, look at the report tonight, and then we are ready to debate it. Yes, when everybody has read, when we know all the problems, well, it could be next week. Today's Thursday. We could debate it on Tuesday so that we actually do justice to this very, very important report.
Clarification, Mr. Speaker, from the Minister.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I think the Minister should have been straightforward to tell the House that the Minister of Health is not here. And that's what my colleague had suggested. Instead of saying members are not ready, we can't debate, just tell us that the Minister is not here and therefore we cannot debate. How I wish Honorable Barrio Munsi was in the Ministry of Health, because he's here, we would have gone ahead to debate. But he's now in a different ministry, displaced. So we defer debate because the Minister is not here.
I think, Mr. Speaker, I think the point Honorable Muluri Mbukasa was raising is not the issue of absence of ministers, because we are here as ministers, and And we can take note. But also, you need to appreciate the point raised by Honorable Musasizi, that this is an accountability committee report, which doesn't necessarily require a response from the minister at this point, because we respond through the Treasury memorandum. But I think the point which is appreciated is that the members seem not to have gone through the detailed report. And health being a very sensitive matter which touches all of us, I think we need to read the report so that when we come to debate, we can give justice to this debate. But otherwise, on the side of the ministers, we are here and we are ready to listen and take note of the issues. Yes.
Honorable members, you see, when is a report deemed to have been brought to the House? Is it when it is uploaded on the iPad, or is it when it is laid before Parliament? So even if this report had been uploaded 3 years ago, for as long as it has not been laid on the table, it's not officially a report, a debatable report of the House. It is only now that you say the House has received this report. Can it proceed to debate it, or will it require time? Now everybody is alerted that such a matter is now ready for debate, so people can prepare. Honorable members, I think let's just defer this debate to Tuesday, and we'll proceed with this. We'll proceed with this matter on Tuesday, and by that time there will be no other issues or what. There will just be straight debate, and the people will have looked at the details of who stole what, and all those things will come out quickly. Yes, let's proceed. Let's proceed that way, please. We have another report that we need to handle. I'll handle your issue.
I'm not about the, Mr. Speaker, I'm not talking about the date of the postponement, but I just wanted you to give guidance and to the House so that they gain from your long-term wisdom in this House, so that when we come on Tuesday on a report of an accountability committee, we're not coming to make a general debate, but more we're coming to the specifics of that report so that you can point out the areas where funds were properly spent and funds needs to be recovered. I thought you could really give that. I know you have the information, you have that guidance. It will be a very important guidance. I thought you would give it. Thank you.
Please take advice from the senior member of this House, the Honorable Biga Kania. You said that, and that should be the spirit of what we'll take on Tuesday when debate resumes. Let's have these debates focused.
Speaker,
yes.
I wanted to get it clear. Do we have parliamentary week next week, or we are coming on Tuesday to debate this? Because we are told that next week is parliamentary week and we're not going to be in the House.
I'm not aware that we are suspending plenary. Are we suspending plenary? Are we suspending plenary? No, we're not suspending plenary. So it's like plenary will proceed. Activities that affect members will be in the morning. Afternoon we'll proceed with the business as usual. So let's defer this debate to Tuesday, and then we proceed. Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, honorable members, for receiving the report. My appeal, Mr. Speaker, is that members, please read. Because was the first time we're appearing on the order paper.
But it was honorable member, please.
My prayer,
let's leave it like that. Let's leave it like that now.
Please, members, read on Tuesday. This is a very critical report. We can change our health system in Uganda. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Now the members have received the report. They have absolutely no reason not to look at the report properly, and then we proceed with it. Before that, they were doing so many other important things. Now, there's a report that is still pending, and we have deferred it. But the chair is here, and the minister is here, and we still have time. And that is the one on foreign affairs. Can we go back to that, and we review the decision of deferring, and we can finish with this so that we can move on? Yes, honorable members? Yes.
Yeah, procedure, Mr. Speaker. I had raised the two fundamental issues that touch the credibility of this report.
Okay.
the credibility of the report where the executive summary is totally
Okay.
at variance with the main report. And the precedent you set in this house is that once such an issue is raised, you direct the clerk to get the answer, look at the report, and come up with a report to see whether actually this report should be entertained by the House.
I'd kind of, that I not remember that when the chair said we are here and I saw the minister coming in, I kind of got carried away. But I think that is the point you had raised, which is a substantial point, the basis of which we had deferred debate on this particular matter. So like I said, the clerk should clarify this, and the directive is made that I need to be guided in writing on how to deal with this particular issue. Thank you. Now, I'll cause an alteration in the order paper to accommodate a bill's first reading. Clerk?
Bill's first reading.
Right Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay on the table for the first reading a bill entitled the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill 2017.
Honorable Minister, you beg to move that the bill entitled that be read the first time.
Right Honorable Speaker, my apologies. I beg to move that a bill entitled the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill 2017 be read for the first time. And with the same bill, I lay on the table a certificate of the financial implications related to that bill. Thank you.
The Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill 2017.
Thank you very much. That bill stands referred to the Committee on Defense and Internal Affairs. And your attention is drawn to Rule 130 of our Rules of Procedure, that you have only 45 days within which to come back to the House to move the House for second reading of the bill. And if you cannot do it in 45 days, the rules also insist that you come back to the House and ask for an extension. If that extension is granted, then you go back and finish. If that extension is denied, the House will proceed without your report. That's what the rules say. And we're going to start observing those strictly to avoid these backlogs that are not necessary for the operations of this House. Thank you. This is the one?
Right Honourable Speaker, I thought out of decency you should have mentioned what the amendment tends to achieve, at least in one sentence or so.
No, that's not what, not at this stage. This is first reading of the bill. When the justification comes, it will come when the committee is ready to proceed with it.
Most obliged, Right Honourable Speaker, but you know, anything to do with terrorism is quite sensitive, and when a minister moves to make an amendment without even a prior copy of such a very sensitive amendment or such a sensitive legislation, we raise eyebrows. And that's why I thought it would be out of decency that you should have mentioned, because even there's no copy on the iPad, no hard copy. Thank you very much, Right Honourable Speaker. I beg for your indulgence to prevail.
Thank you very much. That bill is not being passed today. It has been read for the first time. You have time to look at it. It's going to committee. We can look at it properly and then come back and handle it. Honourable members?
Mr. Speaker?
Yeah, yes. Kyoga.
Thank you.
Kyoga had raised a matter of national importance yesterday and was deferred to today.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to rise on a matter of national importance. This is a matter I should have raised yesterday, but the presiding speaker guided because the ministers were not available. Right Honourable Speaker, on the 19th of January, a fisherman from Kayago, one of the landing sites on Lake Kyoga, the gentleman is called Amadra Sam, a fisherman, went fishing and unfortunately did not return alive. 4 days later, on the 23rd, his body was discovered with both hands and legs tied and dropped into the water near a floating island commonly called the SADS. Mr. Speaker, when the body was discovered, it brought a lot of tension between the tribesmen of Mr. Amadra and that of the suspects. Right Honorable Speaker, the anchoring of SADS in Lake Kyoga has continued to cause death, and there seems to be no critical action taken on this by government. And this is not the first time I am rising up to raise this matter. There are people who are also ferrying sand to anchor the SADS, and in the process they are not observing our policy of sustainable management of our water resources. But the biggest concern that is affecting me and the fishing community is the security of the people at the landing sites. Quite often, there are many deaths that are occasioned in the water and also in the land. Just during the eve of the new year, a policeman went on rampage and fired the gun indiscriminatively to the extent that a stray bullet had to kill one fisherman. So the fishing community are finding themselves extremely vulnerable to death. And I am rising up, Mr. Speaker, to seek assurance from government in as far as security of the fishermen is concerned. Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable members and the front bench, there's a similar issue that is in our business to follow on item number 9 on business to follow. Statement on illegal fishing on the floating islands of Lake Kyoga. I think it was raised by the same honorable member from Kyoga.
That's right, Honorable Speaker.
Is there a way that this matter can be handled comprehensively, taking on the issue of illegal fishing and the current issue that has been raised on security issues and things like that, that we can have a full statement and dispose of this matter on Tuesday?
Right Honorable Speaker, yes, there could be a way of handling this problem comprehensively. The President has indeed issued guidelines to the relevant minister to ensure that the matter is handled. However, when this can be done, I would beg, Right Honorable Speaker, that maybe later than Tuesday, we could actually alert the minister concerned to come with the relevant statement to Parliament, maybe Thursday next week.
Yes,
and
Thursday
then
would
it is
be
discussed.
after cabinet, so would that
After
be okay,
cabinet.
Honorable? So that it's comprehensively handled instead of dealing with it piecemeal. Kyoga?
Mr. Speaker, sir, this is an urgent matter because it's a matter that concerns security and lives of the people. But if in the wisdom of the Honorable Minister, he thinks that Thursday next week is adequate, then I'll be patient enough to wait. Thank you.
In the meantime, internal affairs.
First of all, we, of course, extend our condolences upon the death of the fisherman. On any matter of criminal nature, our police will be able to act immediately. We will get the details from the member, the location and so on with that particular reference to see to it that we're able to contain the insecurity, the immediate insecurity which will arise between the communities. And then that will give us an opportunity to investigate and make a further statement as you have directed.
Thank you. So, Clerk, please, for Thursday next week, bring up this issue on business to follow, item 9, and combine with the other issues secondary. In the meantime, the Minister for Internal Affairs has clearly stated they're going to take some action and liaise with the Honourable Member for Kyoga to see that the people do not continue in desperation about the security situation. I think that's where we are, Honourable Members. There being no further business for this day, this House stands adjourned to Tuesday, 2 o'clock.